in the face of change, culture is one of the first things that really gets hit. So we have to adapt to change. And with that, there's that sense of angst around what does this mean to me? What does this mean to the job that I'm doing? How is this going to affect the way we are? Because people always say, well, I like the way we are. Well, the way we are is fine, and we have to adapt. And so those adaptations affect culture, and they will strengthen the culture as well as challenge it. And that's a really huge leadership issue. Really looking at leadership taking responsibility to understand these changes have a magnitude of impact.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Operatory, brought to you by the amazing team at Dental City. I'm your host, John Stamper, and we're going to keep these conversations going with Betsy Mitchell. It's been awesome talking about all things leadership. And I think most importantly, what the Dental City team was super excited about was providing you and your dental practice some insight on how you can make this year with your team the best year ever. So Betsy, it's good to have you back. How you doing?
Thank you, John. I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. And I'm excited for this episode. As everybody saw in the title, this is about culture. Now, I'm excited to hear you talk about culture because I feel like for the first time, and I'll love your insight on this, numbers of how a culture positively affects a business are becoming more and more real, right? It was, for a while people would say, oh, I have a positive culture. How do you measure that? It feels like it's starting to become measurable.
Oh, I think it is, John. And I think it's one of those things when you start to talk about culture, everybody has a different definition of what is that really, right? And one of the things I like to talk about is that it really is sort of the personality of your company, the personality that people experience, right? Based on what are your values, what do the values mean, and are they lived values or just on paper values? And how does that play out for the people who are living within that culture and what's happening there? So yes, it's a very, very big thing. People are beginning to choose where they work based on what does that culture feel like. They're leaving jobs based on it doesn't feel right, or they're joining places for what they call the fit. And the fit is all about culture.
So as we go along in these episodes, I want to make sure that we tap into your years of experience with a lot of these subjects. And the first question that I want to ask about culture that maybe not a lot of people ask about is that it's not easy, is it?
It isn't easy. It isn't easy because in the face of change, culture is one of the first things that really gets hit. So we have to adapt to change. And with that, there's that sense of angst around what does this mean to me? What does this mean to the job that I'm doing? How is this going to affect the way we are? Because people always say, well, I like the way we are. Well, the way we are is fine, and we have to adapt. And so those adaptations affect culture, and they will strengthen the culture as well as challenge it. And that's a really huge leadership issue. Really looking at leadership taking responsibility to understand these changes have a magnitude of impact. The impact may be small, or it might be enormous, and it might be something that we can't even predict at this point. So you look at, for example, AI coming into the world, there's a magnitude of change and potential that nobody can really predict at this point, other than the fact it's going to be more mammoth, and it is.
Right.
And it creates fear. Fear is the bane of culture. You really don't want people to be in that fear, anxiety place. And so the leaders that are leading any company, leading any business, leading any practice have to pay attention to how does that impact every layer of their operation.
All right. So anytime you start a podcast episode with the word fear, we want to work backwards and help all of our listeners to understand how a practice can minimize that in regards to building a strong culture. And the first thing I wanted to ask you around that is talk about the importance of defining a vision for the practice.
The vision is really what the entire practice is based on. And it's important that everybody in the company or in the practice understands what's the overall vision and what is their part in playing into operationalizing that vision. It's crucial. Vision is also based on what is the value structure of the people who are setting that vision. So we have values, we have vision, we have mission. The vision is that idea of what we want to have happen. The how-to, the how we do it, is all played out in the culture. What's the behavior? How do we move forward with that? What are the expectations? How do we make sure that those are met? What are we rewarding? What are we challenging? All of that comes into play when it comes to the vision. Staying on course is a real key thing. Vision is part of what keeps us on track for aiming and staying in the lane where we need to go.
I feel like a lot of things that you've spoke about in some of these episodes, building trust, having tough conversations, they're all related to having the practice, like you mentioned, have a vision of like where they want to go, so that if the practice for whatever reason gets off track, or if some of these things are difficult for the leadership team to do, that you can bring them back on track by setting that vision. So talk about the importance of alignment when it comes to culture and making sure that everybody is aligned so that you do feel like the practice is going in that forward direction.
Alignment is crucial in almost any endeavor where you're aiming at a common goal or a common vision or an idea where you want to be. If you think about the whole notion, they used to talk about, geese and how geese fly in a rotation. They fly in a formation. There's a lead one here. They fly in that, and it's easy to see that they're all heading in the same direction. Any one of them veering off creates all kinds of disruption. So part of alignment for people is to be able to understand, where are we going? How do I support that? If I don't support it, what does that mean? And what choices do I have if that's the case? If I have a different idea, what are my choices there? It's the leader's responsibility to make sure that people understand what's the ultimate vision, where are we heading, and what is their part in that. And then to ask the questions, does this make sense to you? Does this fit with where you're heading? Because each person has their own alignment toward their goals and toward where they want to be. That needs to be in sync with the alignment of the company. Part of the responsibility as well for that leader is to have a lot of clarity around what does that vision mean. It can't just be a bunch of words that don't make sense or that aren't like real. Yeah. Exactly. It needs to be something you can look at and go, I buy that. I'm in. Or that isn't going to fit for me, and maybe this isn't the right place for me to be. And it's both. The other thing is, when you start talking about not understanding a vision, there's a responsibility for the leader to make sure that people are engaged and aligned, but also for that individual to say, I don't know if I really understand that. And to get to the point where you communicate, we talked about communication earlier, where you communicate on a real level that helps people reach and attain a sense of being in sync with where the practice is going.
The other thing that I know that a lot of practices struggle with when they're trying to build a strong culture is that balance between the clinical, like striving for clinical excellence, and then operational excellence, right? It's this back and forth. I use the analogy, I might age myself a little bit, but that old whack-a-mole game at Chuck E. Cheese where it's like just when you got one down, the other one pops up. And I think, as you know so well in a dental practice, it can feel like that when it comes to balancing being great clinically and being great operationally. How do those two balance when it comes to building a strong culture?
Again, it's based on values, and it's based on what is the ultimate aim of the culture and the vision that the leader or the owners or the dentists have. So you always have to weigh out which things are going to win. Nothing's going to win all the time. In today's world, with any practice, you're dealing with the competing problems of time constraints, expenses, the talent that you have, what's available to you, and the competition. And there are all of those things that are being, looked at from a standpoint of, okay, this is important, and yet we still have this ultimate end game of professional excellence, serving our patients the very best that we can, etc. It comes to the point of having some difficult decisions to make at times. They're not easy. And it comes to compromise. There are times when you have to ask, when is enough enough, and how far do I need to go? And those questions are ones that people struggle with when they're trying to balance out what's our overall framework for serving our patients. It is not an easy choice to make. And it's not easily understood by people who may not be in the decision-making role. So there are many times that I have heard over the course of my career, people say, I don't understand how they got to that decision. That doesn't make sense to me, right? Well, they may not understand it because they don't have all the information.
Right.
They may not understand it because it's not in the context of what's their piece of the work that's being done. Mm-hmm. The leaders and the owners are the ones who are looking at the overall picture that says, this is coming down the road. We have to be prepared for this. Here's a cost that's coming that we didn't anticipate. Here's a change in practice that we didn't anticipate. Here are technological advances that we want to bring into play. All of these different moving pieces will be part of that decision making. In a very strong, healthy culture, you're going to have the leaders communicating that as well as they can, in the best way that they can, to create the understanding of the why for everybody in that company. If people understand the why, they can really much more easily understand the how we're going to do it, and then the how does it affect me? Because it always comes down to, what about me?
Yep. So speaking of that, it sounds funny to sit here and ask you a question about the importance of building a positive, patient-focused practice or environment, because it's like, well, of course that's what we're going to do, right? We're a dental practice.
Right.
But you just mentioned how easy it is at times for all of us and for people in a dental practice to slide into like, how does this affect me? So talk about how a practice can build that patient-focused culture and learn to separate themselves from what's most important, which is taking care of the patients.
I think one of the very first things that they can do is imagine themselves as the patient walking in the door. If I'm walking into a door of an office that's going to be serving me in some way, there are certain things that I know are important to me. And every person that's working in that practice needs to understand what is the patient's experience of their environment, their interaction, and what's happening to them. So number one, put yourself in that person's position, in the patient's position, and imagine that you're the one that's walking in the door. What do you want? What do you want to experience? How do you want to feel? That's number one. Number two is to recognize that in any company, there are going to be times when things go smoothly and there are going to be hiccups. And so that whole thing related to adaptability is really crucial. When something isn't going perfectly, what do I need to do to adapt to that? How do I change to make sure that we get the best possible outcome? And who can I draw on? And it may be that there's nothing that I personally can do, but I might be able to turn to someone else who says, can you help us with this? Or is this something that we can fix? Or to take that to the next level that says, this is something that needs to rise to the top of our company and make sure that we fix the problem and don't let that happen again.
So the last thing I wanted to ask you about, like we've been kind of in and out with these sports analogies,
right?
Your work with the Green Bay Packers. And this last thing I want to ask you on culture is that, first of all, the practice builds an identity. Like you mentioned, who are we? What do we value? All those things. And then they grow, which is a positive thing.
Right.
But can you talk about how a practice can continue to have that growth and hit some of the goals that they want to, in many cases, lofty goals, right? Practice is doing way more than they did a year ago, 3 years ago, but then also being able way to maintain that identity. And I bring in the sports analogy because, you know, like I mentioned, like I listen to a lot of sports, and even to this day, I'll hear commentators talk about a team's identity, right? Like we're defense minded or we're offense minded. But when you relate that to a dental practice, how can a dental practice maintain that identity while at the same time balance the growth?
You know, it's that old adage that, isn't it wonderful that we are successful, and success is also a problem because you're growing and it creates the issues that, you know, exactly what we're talking about. So a couple of things that, you know, any practice that is very well grounded and very well committed to what's in the best interest of their patients and what's in the best interest of their environment is going to be questioning themselves all along. And the questions are, when change comes around, is this a change that we should adopt? We could, but should we? And if we do, what's the impact? So trying to plan for impact when you have growth. The second thing is looking at the impact of that growth on both the employee pool. Who do you have working there? Are you asking them to just do more and more and more? Or are you providing them other things that they need to be able to enhance their skill sets, right? And the overall impact on the patient flow through your office. So you have patients coming in the door. Are they going to feel rushed? Are they going to feel hurried because you've got an awful lot more people? What about rescheduling? What about being able to find time for them? What about being able to say to them, gosh, the soonest they're going to be able to see you is like 5 years from now. I mean, this doesn't fly when you really want what's in best interest. So you have to be posing these questions on how do these successful, wonderful things that are happening impact that patient experience. Always going back to the patient experience. And if you're that patient, if you're walking through this, how are you going to experience that?
Yeah.
Preparing your employees as well to answer the tough questions. So technology is a really good example. They're adding technological advances in every office, right? And people still say, well, I just want to talk to a real person, right? Or whatever. And fine, but what's your answer then? If you're the person behind the counter, how do you respond to that person? We need to be able to give our employees the opportunity to say, here are a couple of good examples of how you can answer that question. If somebody says this to you, how about saying this? And using that as giving them a template for handling tough situations, which come with success.
Right. Yeah. I think that's a great way to wrap this up. It's I don't think too many practices think about that, right? They, as you know, Betsy, like they're just trying to either survive or get to the next month or get to the next year. But there is an element of, if you're looking, if you have that vision and you build that culture and you're thinking that you will be successful or believing that you will be successful, what you're saying is take that time, a little bit of your time and your planning to start to prepare the team when you do grow, that you have a lot of those things in place instead of waiting until that happens and then being a little more reactive.
Being proactive is really, really crucial. And also remember, it's the little things. An apology goes a long way when you're struggling to find something that's going to meet a person's need. An explanation goes a long, long way. We can deal with what we've been told and what we know. It's always that sort of big unknown that creates the other struggles for people.
Yeah. Well, listen, this has been great. And I want to let everybody know that if you're watching this on YouTube, I'd love to have you subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, I'd love to have you subscribe to the Beyond the Operatory podcast. And we've got more with Betsy. As a matter of fact, I kind of had written down here, our next episode is, this one was culture, which I love, and I think a lot of practices really appreciate it. The next one is going to be on business and strategic leadership. We're going to kind of get into where the rubber meets the road in the next one.
Okay.
I love it.
Me too.
I love it. Well, thanks for watching, everybody.